For more than 30 years, the Economist Intelligence Unit has been measuring the relative cost of living across the world's major cities. I'm with John Cout, the editor of the Worldwide Cost of Living Report, to discuss the latest findings. John, tell us a bit about the report and how it's compiled.
So the survey takes place in 131 cities worldwide. We have a correspondent in each of those cities, and those correspondents, they go around stores, they take down prices from the price of a loaf of bread to the price of a car. It's about 400 items in all. And then they return those prices to us. We vet them, we check them. We then convert them into a central currency, which is US dollars, and then we weight them, and then those weights produce an ability to index those cities against one another. And for the purpose of this ranking, because it's a global city, we use New York as the base city, and then base every other city on that.
Which city came out on top, and why?
Well, this year Tokyo was the most expensive city, a dubious title that it's held probably for 14 of the last 20 years. The reason for Tokyo coming top is actually despite a fall in the cost of living index, its index fell by 14 points against New York. But the city that was top last year, Zurich, fell even further. It fell by 39 percentage points, and that's precisely because the Swiss government put in currency controls to stop Swiss cities being too expensive. So in that sense, Tokyo has come back to the top because it's structurally expensive and it's always there or thereabouts.
What were some of the other big movers in the report?
Well, there's an interesting dynamic going on at the moment. We're seeing a lot of Asian cities moving further and further up the rankings. Chinese cities are driven by inflation, wage inflation, and obviously pegging the renminbi to the US dollar, or certainly having it coupled within the US dollar. So that's one of the factors. A lot of Australian cities, they've moved very, very quickly up the ranking. 10 years ago, there were no Australian cities in the top 50, and now I think Sydney's in third place. It's the third most expensive city in the world. And this has come at the expense of European cities. The Eurozone cities are seeing a decline in the ranking. There's obviously subdued inflation, subdued demand in these cities, and also the euro has been weakening as well. So that's created a different balance of power in the top 20. So now 11 of the top 20 cities are from Asia.
Let's talk about the other end of the rankings. What were some of the cheapest cities?
Well, it's interesting because Asia is home to some of the most expensive cities in the world, but it's also home to most of the cheapest cities in the world. Half of the bottom 10 actually come from South Asia, the Indian subcontinent. So we have, Karachi and Mumbai as the world's cheapest cities, and then we also have, Dhaka and Bangladesh is there or thereabouts, Colombo in Sri Lanka, New Delhi, Kathmandu in Nepal. So we have a large number of these cities which are actually very cheap, and I think that this is partly due to the fact that these countries have very high populations and quite a lot of land, and this is causing low wage inflation, or certainly low structural wages, which is keeping prices down.
So does that mean that these cheaper cities enjoy a particular competitive advantage over their more expensive counterparts?
I think in some cases it does, and in other cases it doesn't. One of the big factors that also goes alongside the cost of living is the security risk and the livability that a city has. How good a place is to live, what risks you have investing there. And places like Karachi, Colombo, Dhaka, they're not seen as being particularly stable places. They have a lot of volatility going on. So that's very much a factor that puts people off potentially moving there or living there, and that's as a result they're quite cheap because of this lack of demand maybe. However, places like Mumbai and New Delhi, obviously we've seen quite a lot of outsourcing into India, and that's because of this competitive advantage that brings. So India may be reaping the benefits, certainly.
It's somewhat surprising that there's no North American cities among the top 20 most expensive cities. Why is that?
Well, it's quite strange that the North American cities have all been rising up the rankings very quickly over the last 12 months because of a stronger US dollar, and New York was one of the fastest risers because it also has quite heavy localized inflation. So there's been high increase in the cost of clothing or groceries and also tobacco. So those things have driven American cities up the ranking recently. But this comes back off the back of a very long period where North American cities have been very cheap. 10 years ago, New York was possibly in the top 10, but it's slid out further and further out, and now it's moved back up into, I think it's in 27th now. So it's getting back up there. These cities are getting back up there, but they're still structurally quite cheap, just because it's historically the dollar has been quite weak.
We're recording this in London. How did London do in the rankings?
So London moved up one position in the rankings. It's in joint 16th place at the moment, and I think that reflects the fact that whilst we've had austerity here, and that certainly has been hitting people's wages. There's still been this sort of filter down of like inflation, supply side inflation, which has kept prices buoyant, and we're not in the euro, so we don't actually have that weakening of sterling, which has prompted the eurozone fall.
Thanks, John. You can read the latest results of our worldwide cost of living survey at the address that's on your screen now. Thanks for joining us. Goodbye.